Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
Doing all right. We're here on a sunny Friday morning.
Speak for yourself. It's very cloudy down here.
That's what it's worth mentioning here because the first one in weeks.
I know. But yeah, sunny day there, cloudy day here. Bit of a flip of the weathers, but either way, we are here to preview the Packers' upcoming Week 4 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings, the 3-0 Minnesota Vikings, taking on the 2-1 Green Bay Packers in Lambeau. We'll be giving you everything you need to know for this matchup, things that we're nervous about, things that we think the Packers can take advantage of. But before we get into any of that, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here, come give us a follow on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out, stats that we find when we're doing research for these episodes, injury reports, roster moves, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy, one-stop shopping for everything Titletown, and then subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, whether that's Apple, Google, Spotify. We put all episodes out on YouTube. We're back on YouTube. Once again, shout out to Cousin Eli. But yeah, Dad, should we just get into this? That's the only little pitches I had to do.
Yeah, I think we can get this ball rolling.
Okay.
Try to keep this ball rolling before it crashes into a ditch.
I was going to say, a bit of a Rube Goldberg machine, there's a couple touch-and-go moments where you're like, oh, is it going to make it? And it does.
Okay, anyway, I will admit, I watch those on YouTube.
I watch those all the time on YouTube, especially the one on what's the Ready When I Say Go, Okay Go.
Oh, that's a good one. But it also, have you been watching the domino? You watch the domino competitions?
No,
they go 30,000 or 100,000 dominoes. And some of those have the Rube Goldberg machine mixed into the middle of them.
Yeah, imagine you're on domino 29,900 and you just kind of tip it.
Yeah, actually,
man, that would I would have to give up. I'd cry a little bit. But anyway, let's get into this game. But before we do, just one roster move to take note of. Packers have signed tight end Messiah Swinson to the practice squad and released tight end Johnny Lumpkin. Swinson had been with the Packers previously. He'd been on the Packers practice squad previously and then got signed to Carolina Panthers 53-man roster, but then was just cut by them. And so Packers are bringing him back. Good to get, a tight end back on the practice squad, although they had Johnny Lumpkin, but I think Swinson was someone they had in camp and they kind of liked. So good for them to get him back. But Dad, any thoughts on Swinson coming back, or should we just move on to the injury report for this game?
Yeah, I think they liked some of his traits. Maybe it's probably a developmental blocking tight end. He's another big 6'7", whatever.
Yeah, he's a big man, large man. But yeah, no, I think they like him developmentally, and they clearly liked him enough to keep an eye on him and be like, ooh, he got cut. Let's bring him back. But anyway, Dad, starting off with this game though, Packers Vikings, big game, 3-0 Vikings coming to Lambeau, 2-1 Packers. Let's start with the injury report though, Dad, and let's start on the Packers side. The first thing everyone wants to know is Jordan Love going to play. He has been limited so far throughout this week, as Matt LaFleur will tell you as many times as he can. Matt
LaFleur continue to say every day he's limited for the rest of the season? He's limited.
I hope he's not limited for the rest of the season, but
he'll just say it even after he's played 5 games. Oh, he's limited.
He's limited. But anyway, so I think big takeaways here are he practiced limited all last week and then said he was close on Sunday, but not quite able to go. He's been limited so far this week. They said they're going to take it day by day and give him all the way up till game time. So I don't think we're going to know until late Saturday night, early Sunday morning. The only thing I would point out is the Packers are 3-point favorites in this game. And they were pretty decent underdogs in the last 2 games.
Odds makers are expecting him to play.
The odds makers seem to be expecting him to play because they were underdogs in 2 games against worse opponents than the Vikings. So,
much worse opponents.
Yeah, exactly.
And that we've learned now. I think at the beginning of the season, we didn't know that those were much worse opponents than the Vikings.
Yeah, and so at first I was like, are they just gaining maybe a little more respect for Malik Willis and the Packers team with Malik Willis? Okay, this team can win games, but I don't think they would have been favored against the Vikings if the odds makers didn't think Jordan Love was playing. So do with that information as you will, but that's kind of the Jordan Love update. He's been limited. I think they're going to, he needs to get medically cleared. He needs to be able to protect himself, all these things that they've said already. And they're going to give him all the way up till game time. But that's that. Moving on to the rest of the injury report, though, Dad. A lot of limited players. But as of Friday, we did hear from Mike Spofford that there were 3 players not practicing. Jordan Morgan, Jair Alexander, and Carrington Valentine. Not great that pretty much your 2 starting corners are not practicing right now. If they can't go...
downgraded from Thursday.
Yeah, because they were limited
Jair
Thursday.
and Valentine were both limited on Thursday. And
yeah.
We haven't heard a full story yet by
the
time we're recording this.
And going backwards is never a good sign. It's never good when you go limited to DNP Thursday to Friday. And so if they can't go, it's going to be Eric Stokes and Corey Ballantyne on the outside, which it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not ideal either when you're going against a pretty dynamic passing attack so far, that has been so far for the Vikings. With obviously Justin Jefferson, we know how good he is.
In, Darnold's grill the entire game.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think previously, last year the Packers did really well with backup corners with Carrington Valentine and Corey Ballantyne out there for large stretches. The scheme has changed a lot. They're not playing as much cover two, which is, a little bit lighter on the corners. They're playing a lot more man, a lot more cover three. And I'm maybe a little bit worried as to how that's going to look with, Ballantyne and Stokes out there. Presumably we're guessing Ballantyne, but not having either corner in this game would be a tough ask, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and so the question is whether they'll have to adjust their game plan on defense.
And if they do, it'd be adjusting it quite late in the week, which is also not ideal. But anyway, other things on the injury report for the Vikings, the only thing is Pace, their starting linebacker, will be out. That's the only real update on their end. It sounds like everyone else is going to be, ready to go on Sunday for them.
Right. According to today, like everybody else is good to go. All the ones they had limited during the week, besides Pace, they're all playing.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's been the injury report. Not ideal for the Packers. Hopefully they'll have Jordan Love back in this one, but we'll see. Same as you, Saturday night, Sunday morning. Keep an eye out for corners and those designations, because without two starting corners, this game could get really difficult really fast, even more difficult than it already was.
Pay attention to who gets elevated on Saturday.
Yes, and that's the other thing, is if Jordan Love can't go, they will probably elevate Clifford, and that would be his third elevation, which means he would not be able to have any more for the rest of the year. So just keep that in mind. They would probably end up having to, either keep him on the practice squad, sign him to the 53 later in the year if they need him. Just keep that in mind logistically. This would be Clifford's final elevation. But Dad, moving on to the game preview, a couple of quick facts on this one. The meat and potatoes of our game preview starting off here. Game is at Lambeau, noon Green Bay time.
Meat, potatoes.
That's a Sherlock Holmes. No, one. That's the first Sherlock Holmes. Yes.
But Dredger?
Dredger. Yes, Dredger. But per bet MGM,
I assume he's the meat.
Yes. The Packers are favored by 2.5 points with an over-under of 43.5 for an implied score of 23-21. So just keep all that in mind. But Dad, keep it up with, what the Vikings have been having going on through 3 games. They're 3-0. But what else can you tell us about, how the Vikings have looked so far?
So I'd say like one of the biggest surprise teams of the season, leading the division at 3-0, when I think most predictions had them finishing last in the NFC North. And Sam Darnold is playing some of the best football of his career. By far his best PFF grade so far on a season, though we're only 3 games in. By sort of traditional statistics, which we like to use some of per drive stats to control for pace, they are 7th in points per drive and 15th in yards per drive on offense. That compares to Green Bay, who are 13th in points and 12th in yards per drive. So the Vikings, from that, you can say they're like converting points more efficiently per yard than the Packers are right now. On defense, they are 2nd in the league in points per drive and 9th in yards per drive. The Packers are 12th and 15th in points per drive and yards per drive on defense, which is an improvement, I think, from what we've had previous few years.
Yes, it is a stark improvement. Although, to be fair, 2 of those games were against struggling offenses. But yes.
Oh, I'm sure they're a lead against everybody else except us.
Yeah, exactly. But
evidence, all evidence to the contrary.
But yeah, their offense has been quite good. Their defense has been quite good. I think, Kevin O'Connell and Matt LaFleur right now are probably the 2 leading candidates for Coach of the Year right now.
I think it has to be.
And then Brian Flores is probably the lead for Assistant Coach of the Year. I think that's probably fair right now.
A lot of talk and respect around the league from how they're playing. And so then by DVOA as well, which takes into account opponents' strength, the Vikings are 1st in defense, with the Packers being 12th, which is also a big improvement from what the Packers have been.
I'll take
the
12.
Vikings are what? I'll take 12.
I'll take 12.
I'll take 12
for
the year.
I'll take 12.
And the Vikings are 16th on offense, while Green Bay is 3rd. And the Vikings are 4th in special teams, while Green Bay, by the way, is 24th.
That's probably still the best we've had in like 7 years, though, to be fair.
Trending in the right direction.
But yeah, no, this Vikings team is very good. What they've been able to do on offense with, Sam Darnold, losing JJ McCarthy in the preseason obviously stinks. But they've really been able to rebound with Sam Darnold here. The offense has been really good. The defense has been really good as well. We know that like last year, they had kind of a wonky scheme but not really the horses to run it as much. But this year they brought in some of the horses to run it, and it's, really just taken it to the next level. But Dad, I'm kind of already infringing on our next section, which is, hey, now play nice. But let's talk a little bit. Let's start them out. Let's butter them up. Let's get them comfortable. Let's get them, on their heels a little bit.
Then throw them under the broiler.
Exactly. But so let's start off our first section. What is something positive you have to say about the Vikings? Like, this is a good team. They're 3-0. They're leading the NFC North.
They're obviously doing something right.
And they've with wins against big teams, beating the Niners, smashing the Texans, obliterating the Texans. So 2 pretty strong wins there. And then they beat the Giants in week 1, but that doesn't really matter.
One of these things is not like the other.
Exactly.
One of these things just doesn't belong.
Sorry. You're gonna get this copyright stricken. What is one thing positive you can say about this Vikings team, though?
So what I had is like the run defense has been very good this year, and probably the toughest run defense Green Bay has faced so far. They've given up the second fewest rushing yards per game. They are 3rd in the league in yards per rush per teamrankings.com. They are 5th in ESPN's run stop win rate. Just compared to the Packers' previous 3 opponents, the Eagles were 9th, the Colts were 17th, and the Titans were 23rd.
Mm-hmm.
By PFF run defense grade per team, they are 1st, and they are 1st in fewest yards before contact per rush, and 4th in stuff percentage.
Yeah, they're hitting you which means they're hitting you in the backfield a lot. They're hitting you in the backfield a lot.
You're not getting past the line of scrimmage very often, or very, very little. So those 2 numbers are from pro.nfl.com. They are 6th in rush EPA per play, but only 13th in rush success rate per RBSDM. Mm-hmm. Although NFL.pro has them at 3rd in EPA per rush, so a little bit better. But so they're not giving up big plays, but teams are able to move successfully per play at a better rate than the big plays. That would explain the discrepancy between EPA per play and the rush success rate.
Mm-hmm.
And they are able to do all of this despite having the 2nd highest rate of light boxes on defense, 6 or fewer.
Yeah, it's a really weird defense. It's super aggressive. They we'll talk about it later. They blitz a lot, which we knew from last year. Like last year, when you look at their numbers, it's like no one ran like cover 0 or like drop 8 at a higher rate. So they were just living on both ends of the extreme as hard as you could, and just like no traditional defense. And I think it's hard to deal with because it's so unlike anything else that anyone else is running. Even Matt LaFleur this week said he's the only guy doing it. Like he's doing it. So I think that's part of it, is also you're not prepared for it. But no, it's a very stout defense, and especially the run defense, like you said. The positive that I had was on the other side of the football, but also running related, is their run offense has been really good so far. Shout out to Aaron Jones. We miss you. But per NFL Pro, they're 7th in success rate, 7th in EPA per carry, 8th in rushing yards over expected per attempt, and they're top 10 in both yards before contact and yards after contact per attempt. So
both of them.
So they're really doing a lot in the run game right now. It's kind of what has, I think, allowed Sam Darnold to be so successful is they have, when you're able as a quarterback to lean on a good run game, it just makes everything so much easier. You're not in these 3rd and longs. You're not having to do a bunch of traditional drop back. You're able to, set up the play action more. We know that statistically play action can be run even if the run game is not successful, but I think it becomes even more successful. It just makes life easier for Sam Darnold, and this run game has been outstanding. After last year for them, the run game was a major problem, which is a big reason they went and got Aaron Jones, is because last year with Madison and Chandler, I think they were running like 3 yards a carry, and it was really a slog for them. But this year, that run offense has really exploded for them.
Yeah, and last year, I think a lot of people thought that Madison was going to do really well, and he didn't. And he's actually doing well. It's the Raiders, so it's hard to tell.
Say the Raiders have the worst run offense in the league, I think. I'm pretty
sure.
He's
doing the best of the Raiders running backs. How's that?
That is fair.
But that is some faint praise.
But yeah, so run game on both offense and defense, the Vikings have definitely asserted themselves so far through 3 games. Dad, let's move on to our next section, though, which is I'm nervous about blank. What are some things where specifically the Vikings are good at them, but the Packers are maybe a little vulnerable to them? What are some things that are making you nervous coming into this matchup against the Vikings?
So my first thing I have here kind of goes hand in hand with the what you said about the Vikings run offense. Rushing offense is actually good. I'm still worried about the run defense. Right now, the Packers are 27th in rush yards over expected per attempt on defense, and Minnesota is 8th best on offense. And Green Bay's PFF run defense grade as a team is 24th in the league. And their rush success rate against is a little better. They're kind of middle of the pack at 14th. And as you mentioned, like Aaron Jones is having a great year. He's 5th among running backs in rush yards over expected, 4th among running backs in rush EPA, despite running against the 6th highest rate of stack boxes.
Yeah, he's having a really good year so far.
Second in the league in yak per carry at 4.7 yards after contact per carry.
It's like, yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup. I think the linebackers are really going to have their plates full in this one. I'm curious to see if we get more Cooper. I'm curious to see how Walker looks.
Cooper looks good.
Do too. He does look good. But I think it's going to be a big game for McDuffie. I just think that whole linebacking core in general, and then we're also going to need more from Kenny up front, I think, in this one. For me, though, the first thing that I'm a little bit nervous about, which is kind of similar to that, is passing to the running backs. These numbers are from...
I thought about this thing as well.
Mm-hmm. And so these numbers are from a combination of football database, lineups.com, and CBS Sports. But the Packers are currently allowing the 5th most receiving yards per game to the running back position and 2nd most yards per reception to the running back position. So keep that in mind. Not ideal. And then I'll tell you that Aaron Jones has the 6th most receiving yards in the league amongst running backs. And the Vikings are also averaging over 8 yards per play on screen passes. So just something to keep in mind. They've run 9 screen passes, I believe, so far this year, averaging 8 yards per play on them. It's pretty good. And we've been a little susceptible to those screen passes and as well as those actions out of the backfield for Aaron Jones. I think we've seen what Aaron Jones can do in the receiving game for several years here in Green Bay, and I would not be surprised for that to be a large part of their game plan coming into this week, given the fact the Packers have not defended it so well so far.
Right, and the Packers linebackers are not well graded in coverage, I think, any of them.
Yeah. So that's something I'm keeping my eye on. You're worried about them running the ball. I'm worried about them passing to the running backs. I think we've all kind of agreed that right now that running back linebacker, competition there, that head-to-head matchup, I think is leaning in the way of the Vikings in this game. And hopefully the Packers linebackers can prove us wrong. Hopefully we see some Cooper in this game. Hopefully he plays well. But yeah, that's something I think that is a strong matchup there that maybe is not going in the Packers' favor.
Yeah, it's another thing I'm worried about. And but there are more. I'm worried about the pass rush and the blitz by the Vikings. They are 5th in the league in sack rate and 8th in QB pressure rate.
Yeah, 5th in sack rate, 8th in QB pressure rate, like you said. And they have 5 sacks in every game so far, which is just something I wanted to add on there. That's a pretty impressive number.
I wonder, I'm trying to remember if I saw somebody tweet about whether they're going for their 4th in a row or their 5th in a row, I can't remember what they ended the year on last year.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that's something that I think... I mean, it's an aggressive defense. I think they have the I'll talk about it later, but like the 3rd highest blitz rate in the league. But yeah, I'll get back to that metric. I'm pretty sure it's up there with like 3rd highest blitz rate in the league. They're going to bring the house, and the Packers are going to have to be ready.
Yeah, and they bring the house, or they line up the house, and then
drop everyone out,
switch it all around. What part of the house actually ends up coming?
Exactly. No, yeah, it's a very interesting defense, and I think it's going to be a tough matchup for the Packers. My next thing that I'm a little bit worried about is the red zone. Packers are currently 29th in percentage of red zone drives that end in a touchdown on offense. And to be fair, some of us, like, they've had a backup quarterback, so keep that in mind. All caveats there. The Vikings are 7th in opponent percentage of red zone drives ending in touchdowns, though. So they've been really good at defending the red zone. Packers have been poor at converting those red zone opportunities into touchdowns. So that's just something I'm maybe a little bit worried about, because in a close game against, a good opponent, you kind of have to capitalize on those.
Settling for field goals has bitten the Packers recently.
Pretty much their last 2 losses.
Yeah.
Versus the Eagles in week 1, settling for field goals, and then versus the Niners in the divisional round, settling for field goals.
It'd be nice to get back to the gold zone.
Although, the Niners one wasn't settling for field goals. It was not converting on 4th and short.
Coming up
with
nothing.
They didn't really settle for field goals.
They
came
up with nothing. Twice we came up with nothing.
Exactly. And then the final thing I wanted to touch on is the short yardage run game. This is a really small sample size, and I just wanted to note that, but keep in mind the Vikings are first in the league in stuff rate on 3rd and 2 or less, and the Packers are 17th in success rate and have been stuffed at the 11th highest rate on those 3rd and shorts per NFL Pro. So that's kind of something the Packers have also struggled with, going back to last season even. And that kind of ties into, the red zone struggles is if you can't run in short yardage, it becomes harder to convert in the red zone. But yeah, so that's the other thing that I'm nervous about. But Dad, we've been a bit doom and gloom too long. Too much doom and gloom. Too much things I'm nervous about. Too many compliments for the Vikings. Just it's enough of it. It's making me sick. But let's move on to some exploitable weaknesses of the Vikings. What are some areas for the Vikings that the Packers can maybe attack?
So the first thing I have is interior offensive line pass protection by the Vikings offensive line. Mm-hmm. They are 29th overall in pass blocking efficiency per PFF. Ed Ingram at right guard is 100th of 101 interior offensive linemen in PFF pass blocking grade at 27.2 and is dead last in true pass sets with a grade of 12.9. 12.9 when 60 is average, and has given up 10 pressures.
Yeah,
and then
that Brendel, Bradbury, Ingram trio is not the strongest, interior trio in the league.
Right, and Bradbury at center is 93rd out of those 101 interior offensive linemen in pass blocking grade at 40.6 and 86th in true pass sets at 35.5, and has also given up 10 pressures.
Yeah, it's
so that combo, we should be just attacking that.
This is what I'm saying is this needs to be a big game for Kenny. I think he's had a pretty by his standards not as great first 3 games, and I think they need him to really step up in this one. For me, I think that's a really good one, and it kind of actually ties a little bit into what I was going to talk about is if they can take advantage of that interior offensive line and, especially on passing downs, they can take advantage of these other numbers, which is Sam Darnold has been far less efficient when pressured so far this season. So some numbers here per PFF. When he's been kept clean, he is first in the league in yards per attempt at 10.4. So anytime he's throwing the ball, they're getting a first down. That's pretty dang good. So he's first in yards per attempt when kept clean. But when he's pressured, that falls all the way down to 26th in yards per attempt amongst pressured quarterbacks. So looking at all quarterbacks when pressured, he's the 26th most efficient at just 4.3 yards per attempt. So if you're getting pressure on him, he's going from like the best quarterback in the league to, the bottom 10 starter. So that's, I think, going to be really important for this one. When kept clean, he's 15th in completion percentage, completing 77% of his passes. When pressured, it's down to 25th, completing only 48% of his passes. To his credit, though, he does not have any turnover-worthy plays under pressure so far this year. So that's just something to keep in mind. But he's been so much less efficient when he has been pressured that I think that that's something the Packers can take advantage of.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the quickest route to success for the Packers defense is to get in his face and make him make mistakes. See ghosts. And
like you said,
let's get him back to seeing ghosts.
And like you said, in that interior offensive line, I think is going to be where they need to do their damage because those tackles are really good. Darisaw and O'Neal are very strong bookend tackles, and Darisaw didn't practice Wednesday, but it sounds like he's going to be, or didn't practice Thursday, but it sounds like he's going to be back for this game.
Right.
So.
It was an illness, so not any kind of structural problem, you might say.
Yeah, but anyway, Dad, anything else that you think might be an exploitable weakness though of the Vikings?
So one thing I have here, though, that some of the aspects of their pass defense are good. Some of the coverage does have some shaky metrics. On defense, they give up the 5th most yards of separation on in pass defense. And Byron Murphy, in particular, in the slot, has given up the 4th most yards per slot snap in the league. And he's second on the team in slot snaps at 53, behind safety Josh Metellus, who has 54 slot snaps, but has himself given up the 13th most yards per snap in the slot out of 59 qualifying defensive backs.
Going to be a big Jaden Reed game.
Right. So that's an area that looks like a weakness that could be exploited.
Yeah, and Jaden Reed, had a great game against the Vikings in Week 17 last year. So hopefully he can, carry that over into this game. But yeah, that slot, I think, and the Packers have the weapons to attack in the slot. So I think that that's something that they can, take advantage of. But speaking of
and they can line up different people in the slot too. Reed,
sure.
Go big slot with Watson, or go with the tight end of the slot.
Yeah, they don't seem to put Dobbs much in the slot, but they do put Watson and Wicks there a decent amount as well. But yeah, that's a good point. But anyway, speaking of ways the Packers can, take advantage of weaknesses of the Vikings, let's move on to our next section, which is I hope the Packers blank. This is kind of where we're talking about how we want the Packers, or how we hope the Packers approach specific strategies within the game to, maybe take advantage of some of those weaknesses. Dad, what's the first thing you had here?
Yeah, so what I have is, them targeting the slot in the intermediate depth of the field, like the 10 to 19 yards, looking for either Reed or Watson. This is the part of the field, this intermediate depth, where Minnesota is 19th. This is probably also, got some small sample size, so it could be some noise in the data. But Minnesota's 19th in EPA per pass and 24th in the league in yards per pass in that intermediate depth area, while they're top 5 in short passes in EPA per pass. And the Packers also lead the league in yards per pass play when targeting the slot.
That's a fun stat. I didn't know that one. That's a good one. That's a good pull. Yeah, no, I think that, like you said earlier, their players they've had playing the slot, whether it's Metellus or Murphy, have, been a little shaky, we'll say. And I think that that's probably the first place you want to test, because I wouldn't say their corner room is the strength of their team per se. That's a lot more about
of their safeties, their front,
and their edges and their linebackers. But yeah, so that's definitely something. The thing that I hope the Packers do is less game planning and more. Well, it's a bit game plan, but less specific. I just hope we're ready for play action, and I hope the linebackers are ready to play disciplined, because, like we talked about, their run game's really good. So the linebackers are going to have a lot on their plate with that. It's a lot of zone stuff, but right now, the Vikings are currently running play action at about 28% of their dropbacks. With play action, 11.8 yards per attempt, no turnover-worthy plays, no sacks. Without play action, 6.8 yards per attempt, 2 turnover-worthy plays, 8 sacks. So they have been really successful running play action so far. It's a third of their dropbacks. It's between a quarter and a third of their dropbacks. Like, they're running it a good amount for an NFL team. And they've, it's been a staple of their offense. And I'm a little worried about the Packers linebackers and their eyes in this game.
Yeah, I think they have to have discipline on this, so they don't get
hot take. Yeah, have to have discipline.
right. Yeah.
Just be disciplined.
Is it just for this game?
Just don't bite on play action.
Just don't bite on play action. They get drawn in to give up a 70-yard play.
They're going to have to be ready for it, because I'm worried about the linebacker play in this one. The other things I had were don't blitz Darnold ? He's been elite against the blitz so far this year. I don't know how real that is. It's a very small sample size, but he has a perfect passer rating against the blitz so far per Mike Wobschall. And then I also hope the Packers can avoid beating themselves. They are, like we've talked about, the 5th most penalized team in the league. It's going to come back to bite you when you're playing good teams. So just please don't do it this week.
Especially the mental error. The easy ones to clean up, please.
Yeah.
Line up properly.
Just get lined up.
Simple stuff.
Yeah, just that. Yeah, that stuff's always annoying. But anyway, any other things you hope the Packers do, Dad?
So I had one more thing. It's like, this may be the game to try running between the tackles. So Minnesota is 3rd best in EPA per rush and 2nd best in stuff percentage on runs outside the tackles. But they're a little worse. They're like 12th best in EPA per rush and 16th best in stuff percentage on runs inside the tackles.
I think that's a good number, because they're an elite run defense. If you can find a place where they're even average, like, that's somewhere you need to attack in.
Maybe that's going to be the place to try to run rather than around the edges.
I would have put that first. That's a good pull. That's a very good pull. No, I like that a lot. Yeah, I think that this is going to be a big game for Elton, Myers, and Ryan, because I think they actually on paper have an advantage there along the interior, which I don't get to say much about the Packers' interior offensive line. But no, I think that they should be able to get some push up front. Hopefully, we'll see. But Dad, let's move on to our next section, which is don't take your eye off that guy. This is a player where we either think they're going to be player of the game, or if they have a very good game, it's important to the Packers, or just the Packers winning hinges on them having a good game, where it's like, okay, if they play bad, the Packers are going to lose. If they play well, the Packers are going to win. Dad, who do you have in this spot?
So on offense, we've already mentioned him, Jaden Reed, for all the things. So they want manufacture touches in the run game, find him in the slot with some space for some yak. I think he has a chance to have a very big game.
Yeah, I think it's a good point.
He's been questionable, I think, in practice, but he was last week as well.
Yeah, he had it was like a shin injury, lower leg injury, something like that. And then he added a quad to it later. So he's dealing with, I think, 2 different things right now, which is, they have actually calf and quad is what they have him at right now. So not ideal, but he's been limited. He played on the calf injury last week. Didn't seem like it affected him too much. But yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, but it doesn't sound like we're going to be without him. Hopefully, fingers crossed. My player to watch in this game is Kenny. I've already talked about they need him to have a good game. They need him to be able to get pressure on Sam Darnold. We talked about how Sam Darnold, if they don't pressure him, they're pretty much cooked. And we talked about how the interior offensive line for the Vikings is the weak spot along that offensive line. Go ahead, Kenny. It's been a I would say down, like we talked about, down 3 first games for Kenny. Yeah. Bit of a slow start. But I think this is a matchup he should be primed for, and we'll see. And then the other player I had was originally Jair Alexander, but now it's kind of feeling like he's not going to play, which is very worrying. So I had to pick Eric Stokes. I had to pick a corner. I think when you're going against the best receiver in the league, it's going to be important for your corners to play well. So it's a tough call, tough ask for Stokes, but I'd imagine they're going to double a lot. They have every other time pretty much. But yeah, that's the thing. That's the other player I'm keeping an eye on, because if the corners have a bad game, then I think it's all going to be really tough.
Yeah, and on defense, I have kind of similar to but I have Wyatt.
He's looked good so far. He's had a nice first 3 games.
Yeah, getting the backfield and finishing on plays for the sacks.
We knew that had to regress a little bit. He's still not finishing at an elite level. He's still missing some. But we knew it had to regress at least a little positively, that he would finish some of these pressures this year.
Yeah, so I'm thinking he could have a huge game.
Yeah.
He's very quick off the snap.
He's
to
a
get
good
in the backfield
player.
Inside.
He's a good player.
Even showing some bend.
What is this? This third year now? Sounds right. Yeah.
Yes.
Third year.
This is third year now.
So yeah, I mean, this is about when players usually hopefully start to figure it out. So hopefully he continues along the path he set these first 3 games. But Dad, let's move on to our final section, overtime. This is just anything we have not yet gotten a chance to talk about during our neat little boxes. What we want to talk about. Otherwise, what's your first thing in overtime you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so I was gonna have about the receiving by the Vikings, but you've got that up a little bit sooner.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm keeping an eye on it.
But so I'm putting in are we going to see more the NASCAR package?
Yes. And for those of you who don't know, NASCAR package is kind of a remnants of the Dom Capers defense, but it's all 4 edges just on the D-line, which the Packers ran against the Titans last week. They think they had LVN, Enigbare, Gary, and Smith out there at once. Interesting.
I noticed it twice, and they got a sack both times on 3rd down. And so, it's another way to get pressure up. It works getting pressure up the middle. They also, on both those plays, I think they blitzed one of the
I think they brought Quay
one
Cooper.
time and Cooper the other.
Yeah,
and they ran Cooper on a stunt looping around the outside.
The one
from left
the part
to
of the NASCAR package I'm interested in is because I would have thought if you're putting all 4 of them out there, Van Ness and Gary would be the interior guys, and then Enigbare and Preston would be the true edge rushers. But they've been putting Van Ness and Enigbare. They were putting Enigbare over the center, and Enigbare was roasting their center, so it worked. But it was just surprising because Enigbare is one of the smaller of the 4 of them.
Yeah, so I'm very curious if I won't be surprised if they do it again, and I hope it has the same amount of success.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Especially with the weakness of the interior.
Mm-hmm.
I think to do that, they need to get them in obvious passing situations.
Yeah, which is always a recipe for success. For me, my first thing in overtime is what's the plan for Jefferson? Especially now I wrote this before we knew that Jair and Carrington Valentine might not play. Especially with them on I'm a little nervous. But this is from a quote from Jeff Hafley per Matt Schneidman of The Athletic. His presser was yesterday, I believe. Quote, "It's our job to put our best players in a position to make plays. So if it's our job to put our best players on their best players, then we need to figure out how to do that. I mean, I'm not just going to walk into a game and say the scheme is just strong enough to stop that great player. That's just not how I think. We got to figure out how to stop their best players each week, and if that means doing something a little bit different, then it's our job to do that," end quote. Which is obviously what you want to hear. You want to hear we're not just going to, lean entirely on the scheme. We're not going to be this is what we do. It's good enough to stop them. You like to hear a defensive coordinator be yeah, we're going to need to change stuff when we're playing against elite competition. And I just wonder what they're going to change. I'm going to guess they're going to, right now, I think they're running 50-50, cover 2 and cover 3. It's not as heavy, single high safety as he ran at Boston College. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see a little more cover 2 this week, even though it's not really like his thing. But just to put a lid on, Jefferson and give some cloud coverage his way. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is overtime. This is another weird stat that I just found when I was digging around. The Vikings are surprisingly not great at third and long defense. I don't know if that means anything, but they have the 7th worst defense on 3rd and 7+ by EPA per play. So I don't know. Do with that as you will, but that's just something that I was kind of surprised about, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts on it.
Yeah, we'll see if hopefully we are never in 3rd and long.
That's true. Yeah, just hopefully.
So we just never find out.
Exactly.
It's 3rd and short
That's
every time.
Point. But no, yeah, it was just like a weird stat to me, so I didn't really get that. Any thoughts on the
or then encourage LaFleur to go for more on pass the sticks on 3rd and 14 and 3rd and 18 if that ever happens again.
I mean, if he's willing to throw it downfield with Malik Willis on 3rd and 14, 3rd and 18, just line it up and go. But yeah, any thoughts on the Jefferson game plan though? Anything else you wanted to touch on there?
Yeah, it's a little worrisome, especially we think they're also getting Addison back.
Yeah,
so they're getting all their receivers, and we're maybe losing cornerbacks. I hope not, but that's not giving me a warm fuzzy feeling.
It's not great, Bob.
And we're still an hour from the official injury report coming out.
Yeah, and so we'll know then. Hopefully, it's just like a bit of a rest day for Jair and like a bit of a vet rest day, but. Whenever a player's not practicing on Friday, that's never ideal. But Dad, let's move on to the bottom line. Opponents win if blank. Vikings win if blank.
So I have as like if the Packers linebackers can't limit run success in the middle of the field and lose coverage assignments in the passing game.
It's a very, very fun point. We've talked about, linebackers are going to be key to this game with how successful they've been on the run and how successful they've been throwing to running backs rather. I am a little nervous, but McDuffie's looked good through 3 games. Not always great in coverage, but at least good against the run. I would love to see more Cooper in this game. Wilson has looked good when called upon. I think the big question is Quay. He's had some decent games. He's had some really bad games. Which one are we going to get this week? I don't know. He was pretty good against Tennessee last week. He was very poor against the Colts the week before. And he was, I would say, right kind of in the middle somewhere against the Eagles. But yeah, I agree. The linebackers are going to be major in this game. I have the Vikings win if the Packers can't stop the run. Kind of similar to what you were saying. You're just a little more specific. But if they're going to be able to run, get into favorable down and distance, etc., just pound the rock, take the ball away, hold time of possession, that might just be too much for the Packers to overcome in this one. Moving on to the other side of the ball, a little more positivity, though. Packers win if blank.
For me, I have get pressure up the middle on Darnold. As you mentioned, he's been bad under pressure. He could cough up the ball under pressure. And he's not much of a two-way threat either. So you can commit to pressuring. He can
run a little bit. Run a little bit.
I mean, saying somebody can run a little bit is not the same as saying somebody's one of the best running quarterbacks in the league.
No one's going to confuse him for Anthony Richardson or Jalen Hurts. But
so it's like, okay, every once in a while he might break off an 8-yard run. But he's not going to be running for like 75, 100 yards a game.
You're testing fate, Dad. I think that
you might have said the same things about Heineke and
I was going to say I think he's like
Tommy Cutlets.
I think he's a much better athlete than Tommy Cutlets. I think he's like a Heineke. He's got those like big long strides. He looks kind of awkward sometimes when he runs, but he can get moving.
Yeah, well, the person I would actually say that describes is Daniel Jones.
Yeah, he's kind of.
But I don't think Darnold is anywhere near the athlete of Daniel Jones.
I wouldn't say we're kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but I feel like he's a plus athlete. He ran like a 4.85. I was just looking it up while you were talking. He's got some wheels. There was that one season in Carolina is all I'm remembering, where he was the starter for like the first 5 weeks, and he must have ran for like 50 yards a game at that point because I think that didn't last for the season. I remember last for the season, but he was running really well for
Darnold's looking playable. So he also had a couple of short touchdown runs, if I recall, boosting his fantasy output.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, it's like, what's the bar for running for quarterbacks? Like, I think he's like.
Let me just say, I am less worried about Sam Darnold running the ball than passing it to Justin Jefferson.
That's a very, very fair argument there. Let's
just sum it up.
But no, yeah. So I think he can do a little damage with his legs, but like you said, I think pressuring him along the interior is big time.
you would rather take the chance to pressure him than to let him sit back there.
Fair. For me, I have the Packers win if they can have answers along the offensive line to the games the Vikings are playing on defense. I think it's going to be a big game for the offensive line and just the protection schemes up front, regardless of who's playing quarterback. The Vikings like to throw a lot at you. They like to disguise a lot. They, like to, show one thing, bring another, show one thing, and then actually bring it when you're finally not ready for it. I think that's the game right there in some ways, on that side of the football, at least.
Yeah. So will they, leave a tight end in to help block more often, or will they try to take advantage of the Vikings not having people wide to throw out to wide receiver screens or something?
And just something else I wanted to touch on that I actually would have put in overtime, but just thought of is I think it's also going to be a big game for running back pass protection. When a team is going to blitz a lot, going to send extra, going to send them from odd places, I think that's going to be a lot on the plate of Josh Jacobs, and even especially a lot on the plate of Emmanuel Wilson, who, younger back, doesn't have as much experience in the league. That was a question mark for him, coming into, this season is how's he going to do the little things? How's that going to look for him? And so I think it's going to be a big day for both of them, needing to be able to pick up these blitzers, needing to be able to pick up their assignments, needing to know their assignments and all that jazz, all that good stuff. But that's something I'm keeping my eye on. Just one extra tidbit right here at the end. But
especially if Love plays, I really want the running backs to be
on their P's and Q's.
Yeah, on the P's and Q's on picking up the blitzers.
Yes, but anyway, Dad, as we get to it, last thing here, score prediction. What do you got?
So I'm going Packers winning 27-20.
Okay. I'm
continuing to pick them to win.
I've loved to see. You've been right the last two times. I've been wrong the last two times. Hopefully I'm wrong again this time, but I have Minnesota 24, Green Bay 20. I think if Love was fully healthy and I knew he was playing and I knew he could move around great, I would definitely pick the Packers. But I just think first game back, going to be a little rusty. It's a tough matchup. I'd
like to say, which I wish I had said last week after you picked against the Packers,
in
honor of James Earl Jones, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Rest in peace, big guy. But yeah, so I just think that if they had a full week of it, if it wasn't Love's first game back and I didn't expect him to be a little bit rusty, I would feel a lot more confident. I would definitely pick the Packers.
How mobile he's going to be if he plays even.
Yeah, and then add on to that it's looking like both corners aren't going to play, or not, maybe that both corners might not play.
That makes me a little
nervous
now than when I first made this score prediction.
Hey, no taking it back now. No take backsies. But anyway, so this has been our preview for the Packers' upcoming game against the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's going to be a big game. Right now, the Vikings are first in the NFC North, 3-0. Packers are tied for second at 2-1. If they win this one, I believe they would move to first in the division. I think they would have the tiebreaker. That's right,
because they would have the division record tiebreaker as the first tiebreaker.
Exactly. And so if they can win this game, they'll move to first in the North, which would be a really awesome, step. But just, it's going to be a tough matchup, I think. Vikings are obviously a very good team, haven't lost yet, have beaten two really good teams in San Francisco and the Texans so far. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. Like we said earlier, if you like what you hear here today, subscribe, whether that's, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We even put all episodes back on YouTube. We're back on YouTube after missing a couple. Shout out to Cousin Eli again for the help on that one. And then check us out on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out, stats that we find when we're doing research for these games, injury reports, roster moves, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy. One-stop shopping for everything Titletown. But anyway, like we said, Packers, Vikings, Sunday, Lambeau, noon. Anything else we need to give for the people, Dad? Any other little last little bits of information you want to drop? Any little tidbits?
I just think we should hope for the best.
Yep, hope for the best. But anyway, thank you again so much for listening and enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be doing 2 episodes a week every day for the rest of the season, pre-games and post-games, every single game. So check those out and, subscribe. Leave a comment on a YouTube video. Let us know what you think. We love just talking Packers with the rest of the Packers community, best fans in the world. But yeah, so keep checking them out here. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.